Hey, algebra class, I'm going to work through the extra credit here. So again, if you listening to the whole thing would be a great review. Otherwise, you can certainly fast forward to the problems that you had trouble with. All right, so number one, some of this is filled in. I was having some technical difficulties a couple days ago, but I think we are up and running now. So when we're trying to test to see if something's a quadratic, I'm just going to jump down to the right answer here. When we checked all the x values, those all came out with a difference of +1, which is great. When we did the bottom values, this was a +3, a +9 from -7 to 2, and a +15. And then we do the second difference. Difference between that is a +6 and a +6. Yep, that's our answer. Now on the second one, when we're looking for the vertex, remember that's the little peak here, but be careful, the answer is not -3. If it was -3 is down here. It would have been here. So we got to go over and look at the y value where that parabola touches. So you're looking at this, which is a 0. And it is the minimum because it only gets bigger. It only goes up, so J is our answer. The top part here, we are just like the one we did on the review, so we need to substitute our values in. So I put a -2, a -1, a 0, a 1, and a 2 into all these equations. And just make sure you do order of operations correctly. So you square first, which always makes it positive. So we have a 4 times -2 is a -8. We have a 1 after you square it, times -2 is a -2. We have a 0 squared, which is 0, times -2 is 0. A 1 squared, which is 1, times -2 is -2, and a 2 squared, which is 4, times -2 is -8. So notice these are the same, and that's because whenever you square something, it becomes positive. So I plugged those values in, I went ahead and plotted them, and then again, make sure there's some curve to it. On number 4, remember it says to find the zeros, and another word for zeros is solutions. And if you remember from the review, the place we find the solutions is wherever the parabola crosses the x-axis. So when we look in here, that parabola never crosses the x-axis. So our answer is that there are no zeros. There are no solutions. All right, when we look, oopsie, sorry, off the camera. All right, so when we look down here, it says find the axis of symmetry and the vertex. So again, the axis of symmetry is the opposite of b over 2a. And when you list these out over here, it is in the right form. It's in descending order, y equals, so we're all good there. This is our a, our b, and our c. Don't forget the negatives. So when I take the opposite of b, the opposite of -20 is a +20 over 2 times a -2. So I've got a 20 over a -4, which is a -5. Now to find the vertex, remember axis of symmetry is a line. X equals some number. Vertex is a coordinate. And I've already found the x part of that coordinate, the -5. So all we have to do is plug that x value into our equation, and we will then know what our y is. So when I take that equation and I plug my -5 in for the x's, I will end up with a -5 squared, which is 25, times a -2, which is -50. Got a -20 times a -5, which is a +100, and -40. So -50 plus 100 is +50, -40 is 10. So that's plugged back in for my y value, and there is my answer. Again, it's a coordinate. All right, let's flip it over, almost to the part where it cut off on me. All right, so 6, if you look at 6, if you graph this, what will the y-intercept be? Well, we can't tell that until you get it into the y equals ax squared plus bx plus c form. Okay, so the first thing we did is locate our y, and then know that we have to get rid of everything with it. So I moved the 8 first, so we subtracted 8. It's kind of light there, but I subtracted 8 from both sides. And we are left with a 2y on this side is equal to, and then I wrote it in descending form. 6x squared minus 10x, oopsie over here, and minus 8. These are gone. Then I still need to get rid of the 2, so I got to divide every term by 2. keep this a balanced equation. So I'm left with y equals 3x squared minus 5x minus 4. Now that it's in the right form, we can grab that c value, which is a negative 4, for my answer. All right, then we get to the ball ones here where we're throwing it. So again, the height of a ball in meters is modeled by this equation. F of x is equal to a negative 5x squared plus 6x, where x is our time, and that's why I wrote time down there. And the f of x, or the y, is our height. So the question is, how long is the ball in the air? So again, it's going to start here. It's going to projectile up and come back down. And we want to know, how long was that? Where does it drop here? So we are looking for, when does that height equal 0, right? We know the height is 0 here, but we're trying to figure out where is the height also. When it comes back down, the height is 0. So we have our formula here, and again, you can graph this, get the axis of symmetry and the vertex, that's totally fine. But since it didn't say you had to graph, you can use it as a tool if you'd like. All right, so I've always said you do GCF first, so we're trying to find the greatest common factor, which is a negative x. And we're left with a 5x minus 36. And remember, the zeros property says that when you have two things multiplied together, and I've got a negative x times the 5x minus 36, one of them has to be 0 or both. So I've got this one equal to 0, and I've got this one equal to 0. So when we solve this, we divide by a negative 1, and we're left with 0. I'm sure you saw that. And when we solve this one, we're going to add 36 to both sides. And we're left with 5x equals 36. We are going to divide by 5. And x is going to be equal to 36/5, which as a mixed number is what? How many sets of 5 go into 36? 7 is correct. And how many are left over? 1. Very nice work. So that is 7 1/5, or as a decimal, 1/5 is the same as 2/10, which is 7.2. So it's going to land about here. So we're going to have a projectile. And I didn't find the rest of it, but that's our answer. So this is how long it's been in the air. So 7.2 seconds. All right, let's do some comparing. When we look at these graphs, remember there's 3 things you need to do on the test. You need to tell me 3 facts. You could tell me about vertexes, and you could tell me about axis of symmetries and all sorts of stuff. The 3 easiest things we've talked about are the way it curves, if it curves up or down. And when we look at this, we notice that's a positive before the x squared, and so is that. So that means they both turn upward. We notice that the number before this is a 1, and the number before this one is a 1. The absolute value of those are both 1s. So therefore, the width is the same. Remember, the bigger the number, the actual more narrow the graph. And then lastly, we can use this minus 5, which tells us that g of x translates 5 down from f of x. So g of x translates 5 down from f of x. And that's all we got going there. So let's take a look over here at number 9. It says use this graph of the quadratic function y equals a negative x squared plus 4 to solve the equation. Now it says to use the graph, and again, remember, to solve or to find zeros is the same thing. So we again want to locate that x-axis and see where does it cross, because those are my solutions or my zeros. And in this case, it's when x is equal to a negative 2 or 2. Number 10, solve by factoring. Yay, We love factoring. So we're looking for two numbers that when you add them, you get the -2. And when you multiply them, you get the -24. And the answers for that would be -6 and 4. So we can factor that x minus 6 and x plus 4 equals 0. And again, the zero property says that when these are multiplied together, one of these has to be 0. And you can probably look at those and figure out the solutions, which is totally fine, but just so in case you don't see that, I will show you. So x is equal to 6, or x is equal to a -4. And when there is no coefficient before the x, it's always going to be the opposite. So it's going to be the opposite of the -6, +6, opposite of the +4, -4. All right, number 11, a stunt diver jumps from the top of a 40-meter platform. Okay, so you've got this diver, and he's up here and on this platform, he's just standing there, hello, and he's gonna dive right down. Let's get my thing on the camera there so you can see my great drawing. All right, so the diver's height above water is modeled by this. This is our height. Okay, we don't necessarily know that right now, but what does it ask us to do? It says find the time, so we're trying to find the t, that it takes the diver to reach the water. So when it hits the water, what is the height? His height, remember this is my height over here. This is my time. The height is going to be 0. So again, look what we've got. We can now factor again. But you should always look for your GCF first. And I see that there is a -5 there. Once I've got that -5 out, I can break it down again. So we'll go up here. What two numbers add to give you a -2 and multiply to give you a -8? And what are those? Let's think for a minute. -4 and 2. I believe, yep, that'll work. So we have t minus 4 and t plus 2. And again, when you're multiplying, one of these has to be 0. Well, it's not the -5. So either this or this have to be 0. So that would be, you can look at it and notice it's going to be a +4 and a -2. Because we are setting them both equal to 0. It's always going to turn out to be the opposite, and the coefficient is 1. All right, there we go. Now let's get to the last page here. We have a few more problems to do. It says solve, in this case, using square roots. So it tells you how to do it. First thing I would do on this situation is basically solve for x. That's what we're doing when it says solve for square roots. So we need to take this 9x squared minus 4 equals 0. We are going to solve. Add 4 to both sides. 9x squared equals 4. I'm going to divide both sides by 9. So the last thing you should see is your x squared equal to something. Okay, that's when you know you can start square rooting. You can't square root back here. Okay, so we're going to square root now. And again, that's going to be plus or minus, right, class? Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. And where is that answer? There we go. All right, the next one. Complete the square to form a perfect square trinomial. That is where we have to take the b value. We divide it by 2. I'm sorry, why did I write 1? Divide it by 2, and then we square it. Our answer is 1. Now we're going to use that in the next one because it actually has you work through the whole completing the square. Okay, this is just the start of completing the square. So we will set it up right here. So x squared minus 4x plus what equals 32 plus what? Whenever you see completing the square, you're figuring that out. You need the x squared and the x term alone, and you need any other numbers on the other side. So if there was a number here, you would want to move it to the other side. All right, so again, like we did up here, you take the negative 4, divide it by 2. It's not going to matter if it's negative or positive because you're going to square it, and you will get 4. So 2 squared is 4. I add it to both sides to make sure it stays balanced. And the reason we did this, again, is so that we can put it in our perfect square trinomial form. That's why we did this. We have a perfect square trinomial now. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 4 is 2. The sign will be minus. And now that we have that, we can take the square root and get rid of the root there. So gone, gone. This cancels with this, and we're left with x minus 2 equals, and be careful here, plus or minus 6. Now, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And again, there's two options, plus 6 plus 2 or minus 6 or negative 6 plus 2. That equals an 8. That equals a negative 4. All right, quadratic formula. So this was the part that I did not get to teach you, but thankfully it's just it's kind of works for everything. You know, where some of these completing this square or the factoring and things like that don't always work. Quadratic formula will work every time, but it's just kind of cumbersome for some people to work through. But it will work every time. If it's a factoring problem, you still could have used quadratic formula, but it's just sometimes more simple to use factoring. All right, so let's take a look here. You need to know the formula for the test. So it's the opposite of b, plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's locate, oh, if you notice here, class, this is not written in descending order, so we need to do that. Slide my paper. So I am actually going to try to keep this positive, the x term, so I'm going to move this over here. So I'm going to add the 4x squared to both sides. Okay, so I end up with my 0, but I'm going to write it over here. 4x squared plus 5x plus 9 equals 0. I just put it on this side. Okay, so now we have our a is 4, our b is 5, and our c is 9. So let's plug that in. Opposite of b, negative 5 plus or minus. I'm just plugging values in. B is 5 to the second minus 4 times A times C all over, and this goes all the way over, 2 times A. All right, class, so the only part that people get tripped up on sometimes is order of operations. In here, you do the powers first. So 5 squared is 25. Then you do all this multiplication next. That's your next step. You're not taking this minus 4. So we have 4 times 4 is 16 times 9 is 144. Okay, so I have x equals the opposite of 5 plus, oh, I didn't do the bottom. 2 times 4 is 8. Plus or minus, this comes out to a negative 119, I believe, all over 8. Immediately we have a problem, don't we, folks? There's a negative in the square root. You can't have that. So your answer is right here, no real solutions. Now, if this would have been a positive, I'm just going to say, what if? This wouldn't break down anymore anyway, so this would have been how your answer would have looked if that was a positive. Okay, because the square root of 119 can't be broken down. And last part I didn't get to go over with you either is finding the number of real solutions. How many are there? There's only 3 possibilities, class, 0, 1, or 2. Okay, and when we use what's called the discriminant, which is, I'm blanking here, b squared minus 4ac, it's the inside part of this, not the square root itself, just the inside part. If I do this and I get a 0 for an answer, that means there is one solution. And that will be my answer. If I get, wait, back it up. I'm mixing this up. Sorry, class. Hang on one second. I'm not explaining this in a clear manner. Let me try again. You are going to either get, when you figure this out, you are going to get a positive number, you will get a 0, or you will get a negative number. One of those three things is going to happen. If you get a positive number, that means there are two solutions. If you get exactly 0 for this, that means there is one solution. And if you get a negative number for this, that means there are 0 solutions. And that should make sense because down here, when we did this and we had a negative in here, that led to no solutions, didn't it? Because you can't have that. Only imaginary numbers would work in that situation. So let's look and see what happens. B squared minus 4AC. Oops, it's not in the right order again. So we need to get it in the right order. I'm going to move the add 4x squared to both sides. Subtract 6. And I will be left with a 4x squared minus 7x minus 6 equals 0. So my A is 4, my B is negative 7, and my C is negative 6. So B is negative 7 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 6. So negative 7 squared is 49 minus 4 times 6 is 96, but there's also a negative times a negative, which is a positive. So when I add these two, I end up with 145. Now the answer, the part that helps us here isn't the 145, it's this right here. That's what you're looking for. Is that a positive, a 0, a negative, or is the number a 0? Well, you can tell it's a positive, right, when there's nothing there. So since it's a positive number, my answer to the question, because remember the question asks, how many solutions are there? My answer is going to be 2 solutions because it was positive. Okay? All right. Well, very good, class. Well, that's how it goes here. Make sure you take time to review before the test and to practice any of these that you had trouble on a separate sheet of paper. Have a great day. Bye-bye.